This episode is scripted by John Ruths and Newell Fisher and is narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 33, in which we will be going through chapter 33, The Great River. 2 bits of burrow keeping. I forgot to thank John Ruths for his notes last week. They really are always excellent, and I'm relying on them more and more in our current circumstances, particularly given the military themes in this part of the book. The chapter analysis in this episode, and for the next few, will basically be a redraft of his notes. This is making my life a lot easier at a very stressful time, as we are in the process of moving in with my parents in Lewis, while both working full-time. Fitting 2 households into one house is not easy, especially when you have had no previous plans to do so. So John's help is frankly the difference between an episode happening this week or having to be postponed to next week, something I've always avoided. The only changes I'm making to John's notes are to slightly anglicise the phrasing, because some American phrases in a British accent really don't work. I have to be very careful how I put that, as over half my audience are from the States. Also to take out some of his more personal comments and add in some additional points of my own, as well as changing some phrasing to be more like the ones I usually use. I actually think we both write about Watership Down in a fairly similar way, but I'll be interested to hear any reactions. On the subject of reactions, I'm going to do something I haven't really done before. In fact, I've mostly deliberately avoided it. But ratings and reviews really do make a difference to a podcast, so I'm going to ask you to rate and review this podcast if you enjoy it, and frankly, even if you don't, I'd rather know the truth. As a podcast listener myself, I know how easy it can be to forget to do this for podcasts I've listened to for years. But it is important, and thank you in advance if you feel able to do so. One point of interest from last week, I hadn't noticed before that the dreaded Frith's messenger, who we know to have been a train, is referred to as an angel when the Watership Down raiders cross the Iron Road. I believe that is the only time that happens. It is an interesting one-off use of the word. Chapter 33, The Great River. This is a pretty dense chapter in which a lot happens. The pre-chapter quote from The Wind in the Willows is an interesting one. Clearly it's all about a river as a living, moving thing, almost talking about it as if it's a living animal. The Wind in the Willows, interestingly, was a children's book that featured fully anthropomorphised animals, as in wearing clothes and driving cars, etc. This quotation uses the foreshadowing that Richard Adams is quite good at. Hazel wakes up to the sounds of bats catching insects, a sound that is far louder for a rabbit. Pipkin sees Hazel, and after addressing him formally, states that his leg is dragging. We now see that what Hazel said earlier about his permanently wounded leg is holding true. It will never be what it once was. This is the price that Hazel paid for his forays to Nuthanger Farm, and especially for not listening to Fiver. Hazel is also irritated that Bigwig is directing a certain amount of action. Hazel's irritation seems to be a mix of that slight tension between him and Bigwig, the fact that they have to wait for Kehaar's observations, and a growing nervousness, and he starts to question his own judgment. The longer he waits, the more he starts to come to himself, not be so irritated, and he recognises that the waiting is what is really bothering him. Soon Kehaar returns. It's still quite remarkable how Kehaar is working cooperatively with the Watership Down rabbits. Where is there another warren the equal of this one? Of course, in the real world there are many aspects of rabbit behaviour in this book that are never observed, but in this supernatural rabbit world we suspend disbelief. Together, they find the river in a few paragraphs every bit as descriptive as something written by JRR Tolkien. References are made to arriving in an alien place where you, the stranger, are of no importance. We are reminded that rabbits can only see so far. As they approach the river test, they use all of their senses. If Hazel earlier paid for not listening to Fiver, we see that this will never happen again. He confers with Fiver, who gets him to settle down a bit. At this point, Hazel truly needs Fiver. They also all need Kehaar, who is trying to get them to recognise a bridge. However, neither Hazel nor Fiver knows what a pridge is. Adams compares this to how a, quote, simple African villager, end quote, might view an aeroplane. Although this language is a bit dated now in the context of when it was written, this was said in a non-offensive way, and is different from his much earlier talking about how Irishmen cannot resist a fight. Fiver has a great idea to get the rabbits moving along the bridge by acting in a way that will make them curious. While they've conducted some lapine amphibious operations before, this river is much more to contend with than the one they crossed soon after leaving Sandalford. A fish is seen, and Fiver's description of this as a water hawk is fascinating. It's tough for the rabbits to move. They are very unfamiliar with these surroundings, and even Bigwig moves hesitantly. Kehaar is putting a bit of pressure on Hazel to get this operation going. Hazel seems to agree with Kehaar's point, though. Really, a lot of what we're seeing in an underlying way is the greatest amount of pressure yet that Hazel has freely taken on himself. While he's a part of a quite extraordinary team, he is aware that he is a leader and that a bad decision on his part could be the downfall of them all. Hazel's leg acting up also helps represent how he's being tested mentally. In all of this, Hazel does keep his senses, but you do get the sense that he is mentally juggling in a way. The river becomes a major topic as Hazel discusses how they can all get away. The river may prove to be an obstacle between them and the Efrafans, but it's also one that they must deal with. It seems unlikely that they can simply swim it and get away. It's just too large compared to the Emborn. Reconnaissance saves the day at Blackberry's suggestion. They find a wooden footbridge, and then the real discovery, a boat. We may often think of Fiver as simply being the vision rabbit, but he's also quite intelligent and proves it here when he connects the boat to what happened much earlier when they left Sandalford and crossed the Emborn. While we might suspect that Fiver is really intelligent in much the same way as Blackberry, this seems to prove it. Hazel is completely out of this. While the solution to their getaway is being solved in front of him, he's asking Kehaar if he can delay going by another day. Hazel is the leader, but he's not the smartest or toughest, etc. One of his talents is recognising the skills he does not have in others and putting those to best use. But as regards the finding of the boat, I have to say that, considering the fact that a crucial part of Hazel's plan was to find a way to get away from Efrafa so they could not be followed, relying on finding something as completely unexpected as the boat displays to me a lack of forethought. What on earth would they have done if they had not found it? Or am I being too cynical? This is purely my issue with it, by the way. In any case, Blackberry reacts to Bluebell's water rabbit comment with the phrase, quote, "great golden frith on a hill," end quote, and, quote, "great jumping Rabscuttle," end quote, and gives Fiver a friendly cuff. This is his eureka moment. Blackberry is truly excited. Intelligence-wise, Blackberry and Fiver are in their own category. Once explained, the idea comes to light in the minds of the other rabbits. Hazel quickly identifies that their plan will now fulfil all three of the criteria that he spelled out to Blackberry back in chapter 28. His words to the small group are really inspiring. There's no reason to wait, and he verbally identifies Bigwig as the leader now. Bigwig's reaction is him at his very best and bravest. In this chapter, Adams has again shown us readers that Blackberry and Fiver are the smartest. He also shows that Hazel and Bigwig are the bravest and possess the most leadership qualities. Hazel gives instructions to Bigwig and he accepts them. The tension of the lost paragraph is gone for now. The touching of Hazel and Bigwig's noses reads like it has special significance. This is two leaders, one in charge and the other a subordinate, sharing their last moment together for the time being. Bigwig touching Hazel's nose is military in nature and is the equivalent of a salute, something certainly not lost on Richard Adams and his war service. Bigwig, without further delay, heads towards Efrafa. Many thanks again to John Ruths for basically saving this episode as well as the next few. Next time, we meet General Woundwort in person, and a stranger arrives at Efrafa.